Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Raimundo. I'm Communications Director at UFCW. This call is going to be about the need to reinstate hazard pay for America's essential frontline workers because of the growing and resurgent threat of COVID-19. You will first hear from UFCW International President Mark Perrone, then Senators Sherrod Brown and Elizabeth Warren. This call will be recorded and available to reporters, and we are going to leave 15 minutes at the end for questions after remarks. So now I will introduce UFCW International President Mark Perrone.
Thank you, Jess. And I want to thank Senator Warren and Senator Brown for joining us today. And I want to thank everybody for being on this call, quite honestly. Since the beginning of this pandemic, America's grocery, meat packing, and healthcare workers have been on the front lines of this public health crisis. These workers have borne all the risk. They work every day and they interact with millions of Americans. Quite honestly, while millions of us have been able to stay at home. But because of this significant threat that COVID-19 poses to these workers, the UFCW has been, in fact, determined to lead and speak out in favor of significant steps to protect them. Months ago, the UFCW called for increased COVID-19 testing. We also asked for additional PPE. We asked for a public mandate for masks, and we asked for mask enforcement in all stores and retail operations. And of late, we've been calling for medical grade air filtration systems to be applied to all retail operations and packing houses. While the initial stages of this health crisis, many of our employers, quite honestly, responded to our calls of action. But we did, in fact, begin to see a dramatic change in the beginning of June. For weeks, retail companies like Amazon and Walmart and Kroger's have acted as if COVID-19, that the pandemic was over. Beginning in June, the America's largest retailers stopped paying hazard pay or hero pay or whatever you want to call it. Mask wearing was neither mandatory, quite honestly, nor was it being enforced. And tragically, we are now all witnessing, quite honestly, that this pandemic is not over. In fact, it's getting worse by the day as America reaches even greater infection rates than it did 3 months ago. What's not changed is how these employers are acting. It makes no sense that in March and in April, the last time that we saw cases exploding, companies were willing to pay hazard pay, but now they act as though there's no need for these workers to receive that pay, even though there are obvious risks that they're facing every day. And I ask you, why? Did the pandemic go away? Did the risk that they face every day go away? Even as these cases skyrocket across this country, these same employers act like there's no need to pay workers for the hazards that they face. So let me be very, very blunt. We've lost too many Americans and too many frontline essential workers, not only to this pandemic, but to the irresponsibility of the employers and those who hold political power in our highest offices of this country. Leaders from the White House to countless retail boardrooms have simply failed to do their jobs to protect the American people, the American workers, and our economy. This is not rhetoric. This is very real for us. As of today, the UFCW has lost over 278 of our members, including 93 grocery workers. In addition, nearly 30,000 of our workers have become sick or exposed to COVID-19. The concern is very real, and we are concerned. Our latest national survey of nearly 4,000 union grocery workers across this country, their biggest concern was COVID-19. The second biggest concern was wages and hazard pay and the high cost that these workers are having to pay because of this virus. For example, many schools are delaying openings and most daycare centers are closed. Working parents on the front lines are increasingly concerned on how they're going to manage their childcare. Hazard pay was critical for these workers and for these parents. Now these same workers must do more with less, even as the risks that they face increase. In addition, there are additional insights to the poll that we completed at the end of June. Nearly 1 in 2 all grocery workers are more concerned about COVID-19 now than they were 30 days ago. When we asked these workers why they felt that way, it was because what they saw in others, those other people were ignoring certain things. People weren't wearing masks. Employers were becoming less concerned about the pandemic. Over half our members worry every day about bringing this virus home to their families or getting sick themselves. 7 out of 10 of these workers state that their employers are not enforcing, and let me say that again, enforcing mask mandates in the stores. And the key issue here is that a mandate is meaningless without enforcement. Bless you, Senator. Over 70% of our workers want hazard pay given the risks that they face daily. But maybe the most striking and worrisome statistic is this for all of us. 75% of these frontline workers believe that we're going to see an even worse second wave of this pandemic come fall. The loss of life and these survey numbers highlight the reality that we are seeing that so many American grocery and frontline workers are facing, whether or not they're in healthcare, meatpacking, or food. To be clear, releasing these numbers exposes additional dramatic failures. Months into this pandemic, corporate America continues to refuse to tell you, the media, how many of their workers are actually sick or dying. And I want to ask you why. Why do you believe that Amazon and Walmart won't tell us? These companies refuse to release this information for 2 reasons. First, to hide the high human cost of their actions. But I think this is worse. To make it easier for them to deny the needs for hazard pay or by simply ignoring the obvious health hazards to their workers, but more importantly, to the consumers in our economy. This must end. And we believe that these employers must embrace their responsibility to fight this virus and to provide a safe place to shop and to work. In addition, the time has come to not only establish a mask mandate, but hazard pay mandates for all those frontline workers, a mandate that would ensure that all frontline workers, union and non-union alike, receive hazard pay for as long as they must endure the incredible threat posed by this virus in this pandemic. I want to thank you. And at this moment, I'd like to call on Senator Brown for your remarks. Senator.
Mark, thank you for always speaking for workers and fighting for workers and standing on the front lines the way you do, and just pointing out what we need to do as a nation. So thank you for that. And my friend Elizabeth Warren, who is as strong a voice as anybody for workers in our federal government. Elizabeth, thanks. Good to join with you too. This spring I was talking to one of Mark's members on a roundtable discussion, a remote roundtable discussion from Southwest Ohio, and she said, you know, they call me essential, but I feel expendable because they don't pay me much and they don't protect me at work. That grocery store worker and thousands of others, as Mark points out, are in the front lines of this pandemic. UFCW members risk their lives every day so that Americans can keep food on the table. They're keeping our society going. Corporations claim to understand that. They claim to recognize that. They run feel-good ads saying thank you to essential workers. They claim these workers are at the heart of their companies. But thank you is not enough. Workers don't need a PR campaign. They need fair pay. They need protections on the job. It's as simple as that. These corporations are trying to get positive press off of their workers while ending hazard pay in far too many cases and failing to protect the safety of their workers. Senator Warren and I wrote to 15 major grocery store chains with a clear message. The pandemic is not over. Coronavirus cases are increasing in the US. They're increasing alarmingly in Ohio, a state that managed this coronavirus pretty well in the first couple months. The president has not gotten the spread of this virus under control. He's moved on to other things. 130,000 Americans have lost their lives on his watch. The numbers increase every day. If workers deserved hazard pay in April, as many of them got from their employers, they certainly deserve it even more now. And they need protections to keep them safe on the job. More than, as Mark pointed out, thousands of grocery store workers have gotten sick. Bus drivers, people that work in hospitals, food service workers, custodians, security people, all kinds of people go out every day and expose themselves in their workplace to coronavirus. Then they come home full of anxiety about the potential of infecting their families. These workers weren't paid nearly enough to begin with. We call them essential. We should pay them like they're essential. Many of them don't have paid sick leave. When they carry a UFCW card, they usually do. So many workers that aren't lucky enough to have a union card don't have paid sick days. If they get coronavirus, they face the choice between going to work and risking infecting their coworkers and customers, or going without the paycheck and then not being able to meet their rent payment. Major grocery store chains need to step up. You say your workers are essential, then treat them that way. Our economy is supposed to reward people whose talents are in high demand. That's what we're all taught. That's what you always tell us, right? These workers' skills are keeping our economy going. Their paychecks should reflect that. It comes back to the dignity of work. If you love this country, you fight for the people who make it work, period. People like UFCW workers, union and non-union workers that every day are essential workers, go out and keep this country going, keep this society going. We ought to pay them like that. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I'd like to ask Senator Warren for your remarks, Senator.
So,
and I hope, I saw you sneeze. I hope you're okay. Allergies?
something in the air.
Okay.
Allergies. But thank you. And thank you for your blessing on that. And thank you for your leadership, Mark. You know, you're out there every day and have been forever, fighting for working people, and it makes a difference. We see it here. And thank you, Senator Brown. You are a terrific partner in Washington to all working people. Your work is legendary, and I'm just proud to be here with the two of you to have a chance to talk. I wanted to be on this call today because this is so important. And I wanted to start by saying a big thank you to all of the grocery store workers in Massachusetts. You're helping keep my family fed, and I'm grateful for that. And a thank you to everybody who is on this call across the nation. You are keeping America fed, and we are all grateful. You know, grocery workers right now are facing serious health risks in order to keep their communities fed. They're facing the fear of getting sick at work, as Mark talked about, facing the fear of bringing the coronavirus home to their families. They should be compensated for the extra risk they face every single day just by going to work. I am so glad that UFCW is leading this fight to get grocery store workers the hazardous duty pay that they deserve. And I am right there with UFCW in that fight. On Wednesday, the full Massachusetts congressional delegation sent a letter to Stop and Shop, calling on them to continue the 10% hazard pay increase that workers have been getting since March. And we're going to stay on it. Now, let's be clear here. Stop and Shop's parent company has been doing great during this pandemic. Profits are up. They aren't cutting hazard pay because business is down and it's the only way to keep the stores open. The company has just decided it doesn't want to acknowledge and compensate the workers who are essential to their business. That is just plain wrong. Frontline workers are taking all of the risk. They're the ones who are taking on the emotional turmoil. They didn't sign up for a job that meant putting their lives at risk every day, but they are doing it. And they should get strong hazard pay, or at least an acknowledgement of that extra risk. This week, I am glad to join my friend Sherrod Brown in calling on 15 major grocery stores to restore premium pay for their workers. Those letters also call for the companies to fully implement CDC guidelines to keep their workers safe. You know, this point is really important. Grocery workers and all essential workers deserve premium pay. I mean, serious, robust hazard pay. But that pay isn't enough alone. A pay bump won't keep you alive if you contract COVID-19 because you didn't have the right safety equipment. Essential workers need a whole suite of other protections and benefits as well. One of my top priorities right now is making sure that the next stimulus package includes an essential workers bill of rights. The Bill of Rights includes robust premium pay for all essential workers, but it also includes strong enforceable health and safety protections and an OSHA emergency temporary standard. The Essential Bill of Rights would require universal paid sick leave and paid family and medical leave. It would give healthcare security and childcare, along with other necessary rights and benefits to people who are on the front lines. Now, in my state of Massachusetts, several grocery workers have already lost their lives to this horrible virus. Many more have fallen ill. We also know that a majority of essential workers are women and a disproportionate number are people of color. The numbers that Mark shared are tragic. No person's life is expendable, and that includes every single essential worker. We have to do everything we can to make the job sites as safe as possible during this pandemic and ensure that these workers have strong legal protections. Look, I'm fighting for these urgent protections and for benefits for grocery store workers and every other essential worker. And right alongside Senator Brown, I'm fighting to get them passed as soon as possible. Mark, I'm convinced we all get in this fight, we can do it together. And I want to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senator Brown. I'm going to unmute both of you at this point in time in case there's any comments, but let me say this. You know, I've spent, ever since I was 16 years old, in the food stores. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, during the 45 years that I've worked for this union, and during the 5 years that I worked in the stores while I was putting my way through school, I probably haven't seen or heard of 9 people over all that period of time that were ever killed in a grocery store.
Yeah.
In the last 3 months, you know, I've seen 97. I just, you know, I can't tell you how significant that is. Nobody goes to a grocery store and thinks that they're going to end up dying inside that grocery store. Now, all those circumstances, right? One was because a young man got inside a trash compactor and it wasn't locked out and he was crushed to death. The rest of them were because of, you know, violent situations, robberies, right? And now I'm looking at something that you can't see, touch, feel, or stop without some assistance from the federal government and without some assistance from us, the public, and our employers. And everything that I know in my heart of hearts, it says the following: if you take more risk in investments, you make more money. If you do things that require you to potentially lose your life over, whether or not it's positions in the world, you're paid more money to do those things. Now, who would have thought it would have been grocery work? But we've seen the store counts in these stores in the early days, which was normally about 2,000 people a day. We saw them jump to 10,000 a day. And that's that many people that you're seeing daily, and mask requirements may be out there, but they're not enforcing them. And now our workers are the ones that they're asking to step up to the plate and do the enforcement. That's just not right. It's another risk that they have to take because that mask situation did become politicized. But saying that, let's open it up for questions. I'm sure that a lot of people have questions for the two senators. And Jess, would you take control of the meeting because you're reading the questions for everyone?
Absolutely. Our first question comes from Dave Jameson at Huffington Post.
Hi, thanks everyone for doing the call. Question for Senators Brown and Warren. Trying to get a feel for where the federal hazard pay plan is. Obviously, there's a lot to get through here. There's the extra federal $600 unemployment benefit, sitting state aid. Is the federal hazard pay still kind of realistic politically? And are there any Republican senators other than Mitt Romney who've voiced some support for some kind of plan on this?
All right, I'll go first then, sure. Yes, it's absolutely. I mean, the House of Representatives has passed, they've passed unemployment extension, they've passed emergency rental assistance, they've passed legislation for public, as part of their bill, major dollars for state and local government, public education, and hazard pay and pandemic pay. And we will continue to insist on that. The Republicans, Mitch McConnell's not known for his advocacy for workers, of course, we know that. But we also know there are millions of workers who understand what Mark Barone was saying. Hundreds of thousands belong to his union. There are so many workers in this country that are essential workers. Joe Biden has talked, his first television ad was about essential workers, people that need to be paid for the work they do. And I think we draw a line there to say this is essential in the legislation we're pushing for. In these negotiations, it's absolutely something we will insist on.
Yeah. I just add to what Senator Brown said by saying it's all going to come down to negotiations with the Republicans in the Senate. We've gotten all this pretty much through the House, but so far Mitch McConnell has been saying now he doesn't feel any urgency to do anything. Finally, he said he's going to negotiate, thinks we'll get some kind of package within the next couple of weeks. And the question is not get a Republican co-sponsor for this one section. It's what these overall negotiations look like. And this is part of the reason that I wanted to be on this call today with Senator Brown and with President Barone, because the whole point is to remind people how urgent the circumstances are that face our grocery workers. Everyone who is able to shelter at home owes a huge thank you to the person who went into the grocery store and stocked the shelves and ran the cashier booth and let people into the store. Oh, it was a big thank you to everyone who mopped the floors and unloaded the crates in the back. Oh, it's a big thank you to every grocery store worker. And the way we do that is we thank them by making sure they get the pay they deserve and by making sure that they are safe in their workforce, in their workplace.
Our next question comes from Nathaniel Meyerson at CNN. Nathaniel?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. This question's for Mark. So Mark, so we've seen a bunch of companies this week and the last week, including Walmart and Kroger, say they're going to have mandatory mask wearing for customers. How do you think that Walmart and Kroger and these other chains that are that are doing mandatory masks for customers should enforce it? Should it be the worker's job, or what specifically would you like to see them do?
Well, specifically, I'd like to see them do the following: either place a management person on the front door to address the issue. I'd also, if they're not going to do that, and in most cases we're not seeing that, I think that the workers need some training on how to de-escalate the situation, because some of these situations have gotten out of hand. Part of the risk that's going on inside these stores is when some of my members have asked customers if they would wear masks, and the customers lost, well, I'm going to say they lost their mind for a moment. They got pretty irritated at the work. In fact, in one case, they said, look, I don't care if you get sick. It really doesn't bother me if you get sick because of me not wearing a mask. And I think that when you think of it in those terms, and what we saw early on, in fact, I think at a Dollar General store in Michigan, it escalated to, the worker getting shot and killed. And so I think that the customer needs to be addressed by a person of authority. It would be better if it was a manager. However, we have gotten and obtained memos from other companies that have indicated the following: is that even though they had mask mandates in their cities, the instructions to the employees and to the management was not to do anything if somebody came in and didn't have a mask on. In fact, to avoid it. So I don't want to see, I hear, from a PR standpoint, I hear people saying that they're going to require them, but you have to have enforcement in order for it to be effective. Here's the things that we know, and we heard it this week on a call with Kaiser Permanente. Here's what you need in order to protect workers and customers. You need air filtration in the system, you need masks, and you need to make sure that you have good airflow from the outside of the building to the inside of the building in order to make sure that you can keep people protected. Those are the things that you have to have. And if we do those things, we can reopen our economy. And I want to be clear that we can't keep our economy closed for as long as this pandemic exists. We have to get people back to work. I understand that. However, the only way that we can do it is if we all actually work together in order to get that involved. But people have to understand the significance of it. So.
Nathaniel, imagine if the President of the United States back in April had started to wear a mask and used his bully pulpit to talk about social distancing, about the respect of wearing a mask, and then used the power of his office to issue the OSHA standards that we've asked for repeatedly, Mark's asked for, that Elizabeth and I and others have asked for workplaces. Imagine the difference in how the country would look today. We wouldn't have nearly the kind of problems at the entrance of stores that Mark talked about. Probably half the people who have died would still be alive if the president had shown that kind of leadership. And that this has become, that wearing a mask has become a political statement. It's just the most bizarre commentary on our times.
Our next question comes from Larry Seward.
Good afternoon, Senators and Mark. My question is about Kroger specifically. They say they've invested almost $1 billion to reward their associates, safeguard them. That includes free COVID testing, emergency leave, but they've also awarded premium pay and bonuses, not just in March and April, as you mentioned, but also May and June. What are they missing? Why call them out?
Well, look, I think that they're an industry leader. And the fact of the matter is that initially when they first started out, they started out with just bonuses. And where the rest of the industry was doing an actual pay increase. And you know, I hate to say it, but it was a cheaper way for them to do it, the bonuses, because you're not paid on every hour. If you're a part-time designated person, even though you may be working 40 hours, you're only getting a bonus for half that amount. So it was actually a benefit to them. And the reason why they all did this initially was because they thought they were going to lose workers in a low unemployment environment. If you think about it, unemployment then was around 3%. There was concern that they would have workers leaving their facilities and they couldn't staff the stores. But then let's take a look at what actually happened. As the economy started shutting down, unemployment levels started going up, and everybody started talking about reducing the hero pay, the appreciation pay, and reducing it. Now look, the entire time that we've been going through this process with Kroger and our other employers, they have been the most challenging that we've had as it relates to making mandatory mask mandates and things like that. They've always said along the way they think it's political, they didn't want to get involved in it. We thought it was not political. We thought it was all based in science, and that's how we took the position. We hired epidemiologists. We brought a group of the top 100 scientists, at least together, we've been advertising on their behalf on the group Mask for All. We've done additional work to try to find out from our health and safety department, what can we do in order to make things better? Why am I calling Kroger's out? Well, number one, the $830 million that you talk about was not straight rewards to these workers. You know, that number is closer to about 300 to 400 million. The remaining portion was things that they had to do to the stores in order to make sure that people felt comfortable when they went in there. And that was putting up those shields and the badging on the floors and the $36 million to the top executives that they paid out on bonus pay too. Now I want to be totally clear. All their profits in every major food company in this country are up, and all their sales are up, and they're up substantially by about 20%. And there's been food inflation, which is very good for food stores. So why am I calling the largest grocery company in America out? Why am I calling Walmart out? Because quite frankly, they can afford it.
Larry, Sherrod Brown here, Larry. I know how important Kroger is to the city that you live in Cincinnati, as its corporate headquarters. I spoke to the CEO of Kroger after they talked to him, urging him to require masks, thanking him for the original added pay. But Mark's right. I mean, they are the industry leader. They set the tone in the industry. They announced they were going to stop paying the additional hourly pay. There's simply no reason that, as the leader in the industry, as a profitable company, as a good corporate citizen of my state, that they shouldn't add this pay for these workers. They can afford it, as Mark points out. They're doing very well. They have done the right things inside the store for safety. That's for their workers. That's for the public, and that's for the public to feel comfortable shopping in their stores, of course. So those were good expenditures for the company and for the workers, but we want more for the workers themselves.
Yeah, and I think I also have to say the following. Look, when they came out with a bonus and everybody else came out with the $2, word got back to me through another company that they got a phone call and they were asked, why did y'all do this $2 an hour pay increase? We didn't have to do that. And I think that saying that sort of indicates that they really didn't want to pass the money along to the workers. And there were substantial changes in sales figures in those first few weeks. I mean, we were looking at 40% increases in sales. And so the man hours were up. Productivity was through the roof. Do I think that the workers deserved it because of productivity increases? Yes. Do I think they deserved the wages because of the fact that there were higher risks that they were taking? Yes. Do I think that they should have gotten the money because, quite frankly, their costs went up because of health care, because of child care? Yeah, I do. And I don't think it's too much to ask. They did 1.6 billion extra in profits last year, or over last year to this year in the same quarter. So when you start looking at those numbers, I think, I think that the workers did deserve it. Now, let me say this to you. I believe that the executives at Kroger are good, solid people. I want to say that clearly. I don't think that any of the top executives, all the ones that I know, want to do anything that's inappropriate. But I do think that some of this is based off of the demand on corporate executives to feed Wall Street and the shareholders. And I do think that's part of the problem. And I think our shareholders need to understand that when they're asked to take risks, they get more money. And when our workers are asked to take risks, they should get more money too. So I hope that clarifies a few things, Larry.
Our next question comes from Melissa Repko at CNBC.
Hi, Melissa.
I think we're having trouble unmuting her.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for taking my question. I wanted to expand upon what you're seeing and what you're hearing from workers. You've been calling for a long time for customers to be more conscientious, to wear masks even prior to company announcements this week. What are you hearing from employees? Is the tide turning with actually wearing those masks and complying because of these government mandates and company mandates? Do you think we're at a tipping point perhaps where people are taking this more seriously? What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, in some locations, we're starting to see a turnaround. Like in the state of Texas, we're noticing, at least from our members, they're seeing more masks that are being worn. Now, and I'm seeing more, you and I have talked several times, Melissa, and I told you what it was like down in Quantico and Stafford County in Virginia. And I would tell you at this point in time, it started to turn there. Now, this past weekend, I was down in Bristol, Virginia. I was in Bristol, Tennessee, and through some of those areas. And what I could tell you in those areas, quite honestly, people weren't wearing masks. They weren't social distancing. There was even employees inside the grocery stores weren't wearing them, no matter what side of the border you were on. And to Senator Brown's point, you know, there were a lot of Trump signs down there. And I do think that our president in this particular case could have been more scientific. It could have created a better environment for people to protect themselves if he had used the bully pulpit in the initial stages. And I think that it would have been a good thing for our country. And I think it would have been a good thing for stopping this virus, or at least slowing it down. I really believe that. Look, I've got members that are Republican and members that are Democrats and independents. This was never a political issue and shouldn't have been.
And Melissa, this has become, within my state, it's become an urban, it sort of implied what Mark said, it's become an urban rural divide in many cases. I think more and more in rural areas in my state, people are wearing masks more than they were. They detect the concern and alarm in the governor's voice. In cities, I live in an urban area. I live in an area that's mostly African American. So when I shop, I see more Black people than white people, but generally people of all races in my community are wearing masks when they're grocery shopping, when they're going into a hardware store or whatever. But I think if the President of the United States would set a different tone, it would make a huge difference. It is a science issue, wearing a mask, as Mark said. It's become a political issue because the President of the United States has made it so. And he could change that like that if he were to say how important it is to wear a mask, how important it is to social distance, how important it is that we address head on the terrible things from this virus. And think if he would also talk about the racial disparities among union members, and who's getting sick among people of color that are disproportionately represented in these essential jobs.
Our next question comes from Jennifer Rubin at Washington Post.
Thanks very much. Senator McConnell has spoken about a bottom line for him, which is immunity for employers in the next stimulus package. Can you speak to whether that's a complete non-starter, whether there's some trade-off in there someplace involving compliance with OSHA standards? Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for the writing you do. Elizabeth's no longer in the call, I don't think, so I will answer. If she got back on, she certainly can. It's interesting that the only issue that Senator McConnell really demands is liability protection for American companies in this pandemic, in this terrible, terrible time. You can dial back to March, and there was one amendment on the Senate floor that Senator McConnell allowed to the whole $2 trillion package. That amendment was to strip out the $600 a week unemployment insurance. So the only two issues that Mitch McConnell cared about, taking unemployment from workers, from unemployed workers, from people who are laid off, and protecting corporations at workers' expense. The two issues he's spoken most about, the only two issues he seems to have some passion to care about are anti-worker issues. So this one is to me is dead on arrival. Is his amendment to strip away unemployment benefits.
Our next question comes from Matthew Boyle at Bloomberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for taking my question. This question is for Mark. Mark, I want to know if the 15 grocery chains don't reinstate hazard pay and provide the other safety measures you're calling for, is the UFCW considering taking actions, including call-outs, walkouts, or even strikes? I ask because this isn't the first time you've asked to reinstate the hazard pay. You did so on your June 25th call, where you also called for a public registry of COVID cases. That request was ignored. What happens if they ignore you today?
We're going to continue to do the things that we've been doing digitally and from a public basis, and we're going to continue to call people out. Now, I want to be clear, most of our collective bargaining agreements, y'all getting the background noise? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Most of our collective bargaining agreements don't have pandemic clauses in them. And quite frankly, I don't know of a single union contract in America that had a pandemic clause in it. And most of our contracts do in fact have no strike, no lockout language agreements that are part of those collective bargaining agreements, which limits our ability to do walkouts or call strikes. What we are trying to do is engage the public in a positive way so that they in fact bring the consumer pressure to the table that will ultimately change people's minds. Now, some of that, it just takes time. Matthew, it doesn't happen overnight. Quite honestly, we've been talking to Kroger since day one about making masks mandatory in their stores. And so 3 months later, it's mandatory. You know, sometimes I just have to use whatever tools I have available to me. And we're going to use every tool this union has in order to do that.
I think we have time for one more question from Trevor Shirley.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question's for Senator Brown. Thanks for doing this. The focus today is obviously on the hazard pay issue. Where does that relate in kind of comparison or establishing a balance between pushing harder for hazard pay and pushing harder for physical protective measures in place in the stores?
Well, to me, I don't think you set one priority over the other, and they don't act against each other. To me, one of the most important things that should be in the next package is protections for workers, for all workers, whether it's UFCW members that are meat packers, or whether it's UFCW members in grocery stores, or whether it's union or non-union bus drivers. They should, or custodians or security guards or food preparers, they should all have those protections. In terms of the dollars we ask for, I mean, we want to see the heroes bonus as part of the package in the Senate. We also, though, want to make sure that these companies pay these workers the bonuses or the higher pay, the pandemic pay that many of them were paying in April and May, as they bragged about it publicly. So we will continue to insist in most. For both. I just don't think you really can say what about state and local government? What about rental assistance? What about money to reopen the schools? We need hundreds of billions of dollars for that. All of these are major priorities. Senator McConnell, who saw no sense of urgency through April and May and June and into July, needs to get out and, as Lincoln said, get his public opinion bath and start listening to people, because the needs are great in Eastern Kentucky and Louisville and Lexington and Mansfield, Ohio, and Cincinnati and Philadelphia. And we will continue to insist that we do these things.
All right, Senator, thanks.
Thanks, Trevor.
I think that's all the time for questions we have. I'll turn it over to Mark and Senator Brown for quick final comments.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Senator Brown, for being the staunch supporter for working people that you've been through your entire career. And I want to applaud you for that. I also want to thank you. You know, this is our second call that we've had like this, where we were talking about trying to do things for workers and in the area of hero pay or appreciation pay, and you've been there since the very beginning. I also want to thank Senator Warren. Quite honestly, Senator Warren's been a staunch supporter of the UFCW for a very long time. And I want to thank all the reporters that are on the call today, because quite honestly, I don't know if you understand, and maybe you do, your role in helping make sure that companies do the corporate responsibility program that they should be doing anyway. But I do want to thank you all for taking the time. And I want to turn it over to Senator Brown if he's got any last words he'd like to say.
I would only say like 3 sentences. Most of us on this call have the privilege of working at home, getting full pay, working at home. I have people all over the country that help to take care of them, like the members of Mark's United Food and Commercial Workers. But we get the privilege of working at home, getting paid, and working safely under safe conditions. These are workers that expose themselves to the virus every single day in the workplace. Then they go home with the anxiety of potentially affecting their families, of infecting their families. And it's just important that we all realize that, and that I know you as journalists do. I wish that elected officials did as much as you do, as you afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. So thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. And Jess, thank you for doing this. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. I'm going to say goodbye too.